Hello, everybody, and welcome to Edusations. I'm your host, Phil Strunk, joined today in a really different fashion than if you've watched Edusations before, than what you're used to. I have three administrators here joining me today as part of an admin roundtable, and I want to go around and introduce each one of them, or rather have them introduce themselves to you. So let's start with my principal, Evan Robb.
Thank you very much, Phil. I appreciate the opportunity to be on Edusations, and you do work for me, so we'll be full disclosure about that to the viewing audience. But I do want to say what a wonderful job you do with this show, and I appreciate our connection on social media, and I appreciate how you share such wonderful information to educators all over the country and really all over the world. I'm a middle school principal, and I've been a middle school principal for 19 years. I'm also an author and a speaker. But most importantly, I think at the bottom of the bag, I'd like to say that I am a child advocate and certainly an advocate for staff and building those positive communications that make a difference in education. You asked me to reflect on a book that I've read recently, and I will say Lynchpin by Seth Godin has been the most recent book that I've read.
All right. Well, awesome. Eric?
Yeah. My name's Eric Carlin. I am the assistant principal at Maple Elementary in Smithville, Missouri. This is my third year in this role and ninth year in education. Just love what I do. Love working with kids. Super passionate about PBIS and working with students in that fashion and running things with Renee here. And the book that comes to mind, we just did a book study on Making Learning Magical by Tisha Richmond. And we had her on our podcast as well. And just her vibrant way of presenting different things and trying different things out in your building or in your classroom got me really fired up and has helped shaping some ideas moving forward through the end of the year.
Awesome. How about you, Renee?
I'm Rena Hawkins, principal at Maple Elementary School in Smithville, Missouri, and also co-host of the ShareMo EDU podcast with Eric Carlin. This is my third year as principal at Maple Elementary. I've been in administration 5 years and been in education for 22 years. I would say I'm passionate about just keeping education positive, keeping a positive message out there and sharing that message, sharing our story, sharing the story of others, helping kids to share their stories. Also big into engaging students and just student choice. So a book that I have read recently, I'll do a professional and just a fun book. So professionally, I would say Path to Serendipity by Allison Apsey. And then just a fun book, Girl Wash Your Face.
Girl Wash Your Face. I've heard that book getting more traction. Well, hey, for those of you that are watching right now, you now know who we're going to be talking with throughout the roundtable. The inspiration for creating this was whenever I left college and my professors were talking to me about finding that first teaching job. They gave me some tips, but I didn't really have an insider scoop. And I feel like a lot of the things that I thought were going to be valued in interviews maybe weren't necessarily, and that there were things that were much more important. And so I'm hoping that today we can kind of tackle what are some of those things that administrators see and look at it as being, wow, this is something really important, something that I really want to make sure that the future teacher candidates that we're hiring have. So I'm going to start with a pretty basic question here, and we'll start with Renee here. Renee, whenever somebody's coming in for a teacher job interview, what are maybe one or two traits that you look for, and whenever they exhibit those traits, you think, wow, I really admire that about them?
I think it's important that they carry themselves with confidence. They're introducing themselves right away. They have that good handshake, sitting down, and they can suppress the nerves and just have a conversation. So they can humbly but passionately share about themselves. That is something important to me.
I like that. Humble confidence is really a valuable quality worth keeping in any line of work too. Good. Evan, how about you?
Well, I absolutely agree with what Renee said. I'll throw a couple things on there, and I'll be a little more blunt with the initial contact. Typically, and I've done interviews for a long time, my experience is that when people come into an interview, they're dressed as well as they're ever going to be in your building. And I like to see people take some care and some pride in putting themselves together and presenting themselves in a professional way when they come in for an interview. Of course, also want to make sure that people have a really good balance of pedagogical understanding, you know, the theory and practice of education, but also that they immediately come off extremely positive and kid-centered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kid-centered piece there being a big key. I don't know if this is maybe the time to confess this or tell you this, Evan. Right before I interviewed with my position with you, I'd gone to Dunkin' Donuts and got a brownie batter donut. And right before I went into the interview, I don't know how it happened, some of the batter fell on the side of my pants. And so whenever I went in, I was trying to like smudge it all off and just keep it covered during the interview. Like, I don't want them to think anything bad about me.
I won't go into a lot of details, but what I can say is I was thrilled when after 5 minutes of talking with you, and it was absolutely a wonderful decision on our administrative team to bring you on board, Phil.
Well, thank you. Eric, how about you? What are you looking for whenever an applicant comes into the door?
Yeah, so I think it starts, unfortunately, it's nerve-wracking, but they're either sitting out with like the secretaries, or they're in a group of other people that are doing it. And so I look for the person that when I call their name, they're the ones that's already sitting there and smiling and excited to be there and happy. And then I think also just that opening introduction, making that connection, someone who is clearly personable, someone that I feel like would be a good collaborator, just based on kind of that introduction, meeting them for the first time. And also, I think it kind of comes out in when they kind of share their passions or what things they do bring up when they're introducing themselves. You can tell a lot in that first 5 minutes, like Evan was just mentioning.
Yeah. Only have one chance to make a first impression, so make it right. One thing that I know that I would do, and one thing that my professors advised me in college, was go onto a school's website, check out their mission statement. That way you can bring it up during an interview. Whenever you are interviewing candidates, if they fail to bring up the mission statement, is that kind of a no bingo for me? They didn't do their homework on us sort of situation? Or are there other things that you look for them to be able to display to show that they've been prepared? We'll start this one with Evan.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go in a slightly different angle. So what I typically do is once I send someone an email saying, okay, this is the time of the date that you're going to come to the building to interview, I will say, like you to explore our social media links. I'd like you to explore our website and learn a little bit more about me. And so then when we're in the interview, I will absolutely ask them. I'll say, okay, so I'm hoping you looked over our social media and learned a little bit about the building. What are some things that you can share with us that are really positive, that resonate to you as someone who's potentially interested in coming to our building?
I like that.
So, yeah, so I'm going to probably go more along that angle versus the mission statement.
Right. You want to make sure that they know the school itself more than just like a couple words on a page. Am I not to like oversimplify it?
No,
right?
No, you're 100% correct. I want them to look at the pictures and look at our story and understand that and see if they make a connection to that, if that resonates with them. And then I want to hear their enthusiasm as they communicate about it.
Nice. Renee, what do you think?
I think it comes up when we ask, do you have any questions for us? And they'll say, well, I looked at your website and I saw this, and tell me more about, something from the website or from social media. But I love what Evan just said, and I may have to steal that. Just, throwing it out there. I want you to look on the website and then having that be a question that you ask. So I wouldn't say it's so much about the mission statement, but yes, I'm curious to know if they have done their homework and have looked at our story.
So what does that typically look like for, just to follow up on that, Renee, what does it typically look like whenever somebody has very obviously done their homework on your school?
Well, I would say like recently we've been interviewing for an encore position, a special teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so just that they knew what clubs were offered and asking about what their part would be in that after school club.
Okay. Yeah, good. How about you, Eric? What do you think?
Yeah.
Mission statements and versus knowing other details about the school.
I think two things. So an example that I used when I was interviewing for this position, I studied the website. I studied everything I get my hands on. And in fact, I saw in one of the pictures this old disheveled grill on the courtyard. So I promised in my interview with all these teachers, I said, hey, if this works out, I'll come and grill for the staff on the last day. And sure enough, it is an annual thing that I do. But it was through looking at that, as small as that was, it was taking something that was passionate for me and then finding that and using that as not necessarily just a line, but something to share that I took interest in this building specifically. And then not to kind of cheat the system, but the best advice I ever got from one of my mentors was to ask questions at the end. When you have that opportunity, ask questions that complement the district or the building. So kind of like Renee was talking about with the clubs or whatever, like we have some really great things going on. Or, hey, I saw a green screen when I toured on my screen interview and now I'm back for the second. Like, how do you guys use the green screen in your building? And how could I, here's how I would use it. So ask something that complements the district. But I heavily look for, or I would say people level up for sure when they can tell me about our district when they're interviewing.
Yeah. Follow up for you here, Eric. Somebody you've gone through this, 45-hour long interview, and at the end you ask, "Do you have any questions?" And they say, "I think you've answered them all for me." What thoughts initially come to your mind?
I to speak frankly, I prefer, at least even if it's a couple canned ones, like what's your technology like or whatever. I prefer at least a little bit of follow up, or it's a little bit of them interviewing us and finding out if that's a good fit. And when they don't ask anything additional, it just kind of brings a hard close to the end of the interview, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like an awkward ending. What about you, Evan?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think they're 100% spot on. So I absolutely like people to ask some questions at the end of the interview. I think it shows that they're interested. I think it shows that this is a job that they want, and that's something that I'm trying to sense all throughout the interview. Which is, does someone come here for an interview or they come here for a job? And I want to see people that are passionate and really interested in being a part of our team. I think I want to go back to what Eric said, because he hit something that I think is really important, which is ask questions that complement the district. Ask questions that the administrators or the people on the team can answer. But if someone hits me up with, hey, talk to me about the specific objectives on your school plan under, improving achievement, that's not the kind of question that I want someone to throw at me during an interview. I might find that annoying, to be really frank. So I think focusing on asking questions that that are complementary to the school or dig a little bit deeper into topics that were discussed during the interview is wonderful, and it shows someone's interest. And I think also, and this is something that I would recommend to anyone, is when you're in an interview, you're not just being interviewed, but you should be interviewing the people that you are speaking with also, because I think everyone in this panel would agree that ultimately it really is all about fit. And so we administrators are interested in finding people that are a good fit for us, and we want the people that we speak to ask us some questions to see if we're a good fit for them.
Yeah, those questions are important. And something else that a lot of teacher candidates like to bring in at different points, and sometimes it varies by grade level, is bringing in some sort of portfolio. Renee, whenever somebody brings in a portfolio or doesn't bring in a portfolio, what are you looking for? And just to add on to that too, if they don't bring a portfolio, is that necessarily a mark against them, or is there another way that they can show that, or they can better explain their experiences to you?
So I would say they frequently bring a portfolio and ask, maybe it's at the end, do you want to see it? Well, by that point, probably not, but yes, I will take a look. If they can find a way to say, I ask a question, oh my gosh, let me show you an example in my portfolio. Yes, tie it into the question, bring it out then, and showcase yourself. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. How about you, Eric?
I agree 100%. It almost kind of like that awkward ending. It's like, well, here's portfolio, like you can keep it, or anyway, just want to show you. And it's kind of like just trying to check the box.
Yeah.
And it really deflates. And like Renee said, honestly, by the end of the interview or even halfway through, the decision's pretty much been made based on those first questions. So yes, if you can integrate it in or show, back up your evidence. Otherwise, I think it'd be good to just make sure your answers are very elaborate, if not.
Have good depth and detail into what they're saying over just, I don't know, over the shallow waters of it, maybe.
May I throw in an additional piece?
Yeah, go ahead, Evan.
And absolutely agree with what my colleagues just said. One of the things that I kind of like is someone who may present something in a very different way. So, the traditional portfolio is sometimes in a 3-ring binder, or it's a big folder of all this collected materials. But I've had some people in the past who say, okay, I built a website and I have a blog on this website and I have some information about myself as a professional. Can I send you the link, or can I quickly show you the website? That's interesting to me because it's a novel and different way to potentially present some information on behalf of the candidate.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Evan, you've been a principal 19 years now. You've interviewed a lot of teachers, and some of them are coming in and they have years and years of experience. Some of them are coming and they just graduated a month ago. What are some things that you take into consideration whenever it comes to hiring somebody new versus somebody that's experienced?
Okay, that's a big question. And sorry. No, I'm used to your big questions, Phil.
Okay.
So let me throw a couple things. I think at the core, I am interested in someone who likes kids and wants to be around kids. I'm very interested in someone's personal efficacy and how they believe that they can be a force to help kids learn and find success within school. I am extremely interested in someone's philosophy of assessment and grading. And in fact, I asked some very particular questions that I believe gives some insight into someone's flexibility as an educator versus someone's rigidity as an educator. So it's not so much the years of experience that I look for. I'm ultimately looking more for someone who sees himself as a learner, someone who has a high sense of efficacy, someone who has a good sort of philosophical understanding of who they are and what they believe in, and someone who can convey in an interview some skills, some practices that they can bring into the classroom to help differentiate for kids and help kids be successful.
Good.
So there's a funny thing in education, and I think we'll all agree with this, that 10 years of experience can be a wonderful thing if it's 10 years of reflecting, changing, growing, and developing as an educator. But if it's 10 years of doing the same thing every year, I think it's a lot different. And so we have to be careful with quickly just associating experience and expertise with years. It can absolutely be an indicator of someone who is a fine educator, but it not necessarily is, and that's why the interview process is so important.
Yeah, you got 3 head nods on those last few
Yeah,
statements.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, Renee, anything else you want to add?
I would say the other thing is just knowing the team and what the team needs. Like if you're hiring for a specific position, so definitely that need outweighs years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the person and what they're bringing to the team, and we're looking for someone to grow us and to mesh with that team.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That's a great comment.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. I know something that Evan has frequently said whenever he's been looking for teacher candidates is that he's looking for somebody that's a good fit, that's good for the family. I think there's a lot of value to that too, and sometimes that's going to be somebody fresh out of college. So Eric, somebody just graduated in May and they're interviewing for a job in June. What are some tips you have for them as they get ready to go into maybe their first interview period?
Yeah, I think one is just fight the nerves, be yourself. And I would just say two, don't sell yourself short just because you don't have 3 or 4 years experience. Because, when we've hired, or last year, we hired a couple that were brand new and then some with 10 years experience. And we turned down some that had 5 years experience or 3 years experience. So don't sell yourself short just because it's your first go round. And I'd also say make sure that you convey that piece that you're knowledgeable enough, and just a little something would be like just in the way that you answer a question. So I've had experiences where they say, well, what I've seen is my cooperating teacher does this, And I think that's cool. Or I've seen them, I've heard about this, but whatever. I want to hear, this is what I've done, or this in my classroom, my kids, even though they were just student teaching, they take that ownership of, this is my classroom, these are my kids, I'm passionate about it, here's what I tried, here's what I'm doing, not this is what someone else is doing and I just kind of followed suit.
Yeah, some originality. What do you think, Renee?
Everybody's going after the same job, but what is different about you? What is special about you? What connections do you have? If you've traveled in college, what experience do you bring that's different from other people?
What makes you you? Because there's no one more youer than you. Hope that's okay.
Right. That's right.
How about you, Evan? What do you think? Tips for new college grads getting ready to come into their first interview?
I certainly would echo what Eric and Renee just said. One of the things that I would recommend is practice a little bit. My experience is sometimes young people do not get a lot of experience practicing interviews. And I've seen some people come into interviews and they clearly show that they have not practiced and prepared for the interview. I mean, there are certain questions, if you do a web search, that you can kind of predict, some of these questions are going to come your way. And I think it helps if you have a little idea of how you're going to move through them, especially if nerves start getting hold of you. And, I love the idea of when you come in, be prepared and demonstrate that, if you believe it, that you'd be a really good fit for the team. I think confidence is a good thing. I think being overconfident is not. But I think that balance of communicating that you're a team player, that you're a learner, that you want to work with people collaboratively, but you also feel that you're a good fit for the team is fine. Being overly humble and not, as Eric just said, not selling yourself to some degree can be limiting, for people when they go into the interview process. But my best advice is prepare a little bit. Sit down with a friend or sit down with mom and dad and do some practice questions and kind of see how you work through them. It'll build your confidence.
All right, Educations fans, that is the end of part 1 of the Educations Admin Roundtable. I hope that the things you've watched today have given you a lot of really good tips, especially if you're somebody that's looking for a new job in education, as Eric, Renee, and Evan gave us some really awesome tips. I'm very thankful that Eric, Renee, and Evan would take time out of their schedule to provide us with this great wealth of knowledge. Be sure to come back in 2 weeks for part 2. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss the episode, you can go ahead and just subscribe to the channel and you'll get an update as soon as part 2 is posted live. Again, very thankful for what Eric, Evan, and Renee have had to share with us. Very excited, and I'm really hoping this is going to open up doors and pathways for those that are looking for jobs. If you know somebody that's looking for a job in education, please share this video with them. I created this video, or I asked for the group to join us, specifically said this can be a great resource for those looking for, in most cases, their first ever job in education. So if you're connected with any universities, colleges, or even just some kids that are looking for their first gig in this awesome career in education, please, please, please share it with them. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't miss part 2. Eric, Evan, and Renee still have a lot of really great resources to share with us. So check back in, subscribe to the channel. Please consider giving a comment about some things that you enjoyed in this as well. Thanks again so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.